Maybe helping Alex wrestle with the technology.
Yeah. I just got a note from Richard, but I can't see that Richard is on. Scott, do you know how we're doing this? Are only the commission members and staff on this part of the Zoom call, or where does it identify who else watching?
So I'm just taking a quick look. Let's see, speaker gallery. I am only seeing Alex, myself, Wade, Angie, you, Dan Dean, Mason, Blake, and Susan Taylor Rash. Oh, sorry. There are 19 participants listed right now.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm looking in the lower part of the screen. Looks like there's
I see
8
nobody.
panelists. There are 11 attendees and 8 panelists. And it looks like video is still disabled.
Well, I like what Bill and Peggy did, but I'm gonna do the same thing, except I'm just gonna put a picture of what Susie looks like.
I see Sally Stansel is on now. Hey, Sally.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Sally.
Hi, how are you, Mason?
Good, thank you.
Well, why don't, it's 10:30. I've got to leave really close to 11:30 so we can drive to Florence. So if we can get started, I'll call the meeting to order, and let's have a moment of silence. Oh, man. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. Y'all got the minutes of the February meeting. And are there any changes or corrections?
I have a comment to make, Bill. The text of the minutes is a little unclear about the vested rights change we made with respect to conditional zoning.
I agree.
And I don't really, in my understanding from at least my intent in the motion, as I recall, and I've checked my notes and I don't have exact notes, but is that we approved a 2-year statute of limitations for all conditional zoning approvals, and with a 2-year extension if approved by the council. And that's not clear from the minutes.
I think we can work those up. I felt the same, and it needs to also be clear that we're talking about that it continues for a 2-year period within which to commence construction.
Right.
Because the zoning would continue, assuming the improvements are constructed. So I'll get with Scott on that, probably the first of the week. And we'll get that changed, and we'll with that amendment, then we'll recirculate them next week. That's okay. So let's hold on the adoption of the minutes until we get that, because that's pretty important. So
And this is Scott. I just want to clarify. I'm not preparing the minutes.
oh, Angie is, that's right. Or Alex. I guess Angie does the minutes. Okay.
I believe so. I am not.
I will get with Angie next week. Are y'all comfortable with holding those, not approving them, deferring that till the next meeting?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. Right. It's hard to tell who is on, and I wanted to say something in case there are people on about the consideration of setbacks. This does not come up in the context of what the MRA is contemplating. This is something we've been working on as part of our ordinance revisions for over 2 years, almost 2 years now. So if there are people here that are attending because they think we're going to take a position on the MRA Lodge. We're not going to do that. In fact, there's been no application submitted concerning that. And under the procedure, once the application is submitted, it first is considered by the zoning administrator, then it goes to the planning commission, who does not hold a hearing, but it considers it and makes a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. And then the Board of Adjustment holds a public hearing and makes the decision. So I just want to make sure if anybody's on the line because they would like to speak to that, we're not going to be considering that this morning. So I would just advise you of that. Anybody want to add anything to that announcement? Okay. I talked with Scott and told him that we had already gone through most of the examples that he gave and what we really needed to focus on and get an explanation from him as to what exactly he was looking for on his code amendments, which are in the package. And I'd like to start with that. And I told him that we probably would not make any decisions today. Of course, that's up to y'all. But since we're submitting the entire ordinance rewrite, as it's already been to the council, or been submitted to the council since November, we didn't want to interlay bits and pieces until that was considered. And so with your permission, Scott, I think that's what we will do.
Sure. Bill, can you give me 2 minutes to check on something? Just take a quick break. I'm going to check with Alex on one quick thing. Thank you.
Okay, while you're going to Wade, you submitted a drawing and what is the drawing or the picture attempting to show?
Well, we talked about setbacks, and of course, I'm in favor of some adjustments. And every time we've talked about it, my sense is that everybody's sort of happy with things as they are. And I was trying to point out that the purpose of a setback is to create some spatial separation between what is built and other people's experience passing by it or living next door to it. And so the idea that we have a 30-foot front yard setback is something that is either good or bad. But the fact that the 30-foot setback has nothing to do sometimes with how far away the road is. And so what is the purpose of having a hard and fast 30-foot front yard setback if the road is another 40 feet away from that person's property line? Which on the little map that was on the screen a minute ago, where there's a 78-foot right-of-way, so to the left of that image, there's 40 feet between the road and the property line of that house. And so why would it be helpful to the public for that house to be 30 feet from the property line and another 40 feet from the road, whereas the 30-foot setback generally is intended to keep you 30 feet from the road right-of-way, which would be 30 feet. The road's only 16 feet. And so we've got something that's arbitrary all over Montreat, in some places more than other. And
Wait, sorry to interrupt. This is Scott. Just want to quickly clarify. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, we at least have that functionality. So I can bring up any of the documents that you all want to display for the purposes of the meeting.
Well, Wade, then let's hold the discussion of the setbacks until we get to that. And let's start with Scott and let him lead us through what he wants us to consider on these changes to the revised ordinance. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me bring up, would you like me to bring up the Word document?
The what?
The Word document that I
Yeah.
prepared?
Yeah, the one that, that's it.
Okay.
So why don't you explain it? And then the floor is open for questions too from members of the commission.
I'm sorry, were the commissioners going to go through questions first, or would you like me to walk through this first?
Now I'd like you to walk through it so they can feel free to ask questions.
Okay, gotcha. Just for a little bit of background, just for anyone that hasn't seen or discussed this before, this is my walkthrough of Montreat's existing zoning ordinance, particularly related to setbacks. I've had several recent inquiries from different property owners across town looking at doing things like minor additions on decks, what have you, and the kind of the recurring theme that at least I've observed is that so many of Montreat's lots, rightly, wrongly, historically are small and urban in scale. And when I say urban, I mean 50 feet wide by 150 feet deep, give or take, what have you. Obviously, there are bigger and smaller lots, but generally a quarter acre or smaller is generally considered to be what's, more of an urban condition. So the conflicts that I'm observing and that I've prepared in this document, at least in looking at the text of the existing zoning ordinance and the proposed ordinance, is that the existing dimensional standards of setbacks and minimum lot sizes don't match the built pattern of the town. And that's a much larger question of, does the future of the town want to look like a much larger lotted and sparsely populated town, or does the zoning ordinance and its dimensional standards want to roughly match and be calibrated to the existing conditions that are on the ground? So what I've done, and can you all see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. So what I've done is list what the existing ordinance languages, and a lot of this is definitions, but it also works through some elements of setbacks within specific zoning districts. And what I've done is done what's called track changes, so you can see markups of either my comments, questions, suggestions for word changes. One thing that I've noticed constantly throughout the ordinance as it exists now and in the proposed ordinance is that the term yard and setback is used variably. Honestly, if you use setback, that's a much simpler definition. Setback creates a yard. You really don't need a definition or any reference to yards when you have a setback, and then you define what can occur within the setback or the buildable area, what have you. I think that's a much simplified, much cleaner way to define that. Just looking at the existing language of a building, it's stating decks, whether freestanding or attached, are required to comply with the setback provisions for buildings. I just make a note here, this language needs to include a reference to ground level patios. The proposed language is roughly similar to the existing language. There is a mention of pertinent features or exterior structural elements requiring permanent attachment to a building being considered part of a building. The only potential conflict within that, just in the instance of someone wanting to build a roof over an existing patio, is that roof then becomes part of quote unquote their building or house. If that's within the setback, that currently necessitates them seeking a variance from the Board of Adjustment. It's not something that the zoning administrator can approve administratively. And again, I've got notes running through here about patios because it's something that's a very specific thing that has come up. Sorry, is there a question?
Yeah, are you saying that a vertical wall on a patio then that's an expansion?
Let me see if I can scroll. Yeah, so that's kind of a central talking point of there is the nonconformities language, and there is language that says expansion, but it does not clarify vertical expansion versus horizontal expansion. I'm differentiating between those because, let's see if I can get to nonconformities. I'm differentiating between those because I regard something that's occurring vertically, as long as it meets all other zoning standards of height limits, what have you, as not being an expansion into a setback or whatnot. If the existing condition is already within a setback, that's the question about changing the actual setbacks. Let me see if I can just find the nonconformities language.
Bill, could I interject, please?
Sure.
This is Dan. Scott, I just want to say, I disagree with your suggestion. I'll just get it out there.
Okay.
A patio could be anything from somebody just laying a bunch of flagstone out in the backyard and calling it a patio, and it could run all the way to the property line for all we know. And it could be a legitimate patio, a 6-inch or 2-foot high patio. But to give that person the right to construct walls and a roof and add a full structure on top of that, I think would be a huge mistake. And to carry it further, I even agree with that premise as far as decks, whether it's a 3-foot high deck or a 10-foot high deck. I consider it sort of in the same vein as a patio. And I think to erect a structure on top of that changes the whole outlook of the neighborhood, the yard, the neighbor's view across the backyard or front yard, wherever it is. And I think I would suggest we need to go back and probably start back. I think you've raised some issues we need to address and clarify. And
Sure.
maybe a good point would be to define building as something that has a roof over it. And if it doesn't have a roof over it, it's not a building. And go back and redefine some of our definitions, building footprint, and so forth. But the basic premise that a patio and a deck would enable somebody to construct walls and a roof over it without having to get a variance. I personally, at least as far as my vote, I would be opposed to that.
Sure. And I'm not necessarily, I'm really just trying to point out the current language in the ordinance that is in some instances not explicitly clear in terms of expansion.
And I agree with you on that. And I thank you for raising that point. I think there is some room for clarification and something that we need to get into the weed zone. And maybe we need to redefine our definition of structure, redefine our definition of building,
Right.
maybe a definition for building footprints if that comes up somewhere. And I commend you for bringing those to our attention. I do think we need to address them. I'm just saying, if I'm understanding what you're saying, the basic approach on decks and patios, we may disagree on that.
Sure.
Well, as I recall, Susan, on your, as was related to the walls on the patio or deck up on, is it Harmony that we talked about? I forget who that is, but you had concluded that a vertical construction was an expansion, as I recall. Is that right?
So the problem we have with the current zoning ordinance provisions is that we don't have a definition of expansion. And so, if we don't have, and that's one thing that I think Scott is, this is very helpful what he's put together, because it helps us look at both the article on nonconformities and our definitions to make sure that we are addressing some pretty common situations that are coming before town staff. And so, our problem is if we don't have an ordinance provision that specifically addresses something, we fall back to it's not allowed. If it's not, if we don't have something that tells us what to do, then we're in a fallback position. So going forward, with the, the new ordinance provisions, the amendment, it may be that we don't do it as part of the amendment, the big overall amendment, but pretty shortly after that, come back with a set of proposed changes where we're addressing these situations so that town staff has clear instructions on what to do in these situations. And it's a matter of implementing the ordinance, and instead of trying to figure out, well, what does the ordinance mean? Let's have it clear what we mean. And if we think that if the decision of the town is that a vertical expansion is an expansion, let's say so.
Yeah.
And I highlight here on the screen, this is the language in the proposed ordinance. This item B right here is talking about routine maintenance, repairs, renovations, structural alterations shall be permitted as so long as no expansion of the nonconformity occurs as a result of said. So the question that I'm putting right here is replacement allowed within an existing footprint? Structural alterations be defined as vertical within existing footprint versus horizontal expansion beyond footprint. And that primarily concerns setbacks. That's the gist of the issue that I've experienced so far administering the ordinance, is that so often, again, with so many older homes and structures within Montreat, the existing zoning setbacks are fairly large, and I'll say suburban oriented toward a flatter topography and toward a larger lot structure than the town has.
And Scott and Bill, can I interject something here?
Sure.
This is Alan Crawford, sorry.
Okay.
It took me a little while to figure out the whole mic thing. The case was brought up, and particularly on Harmony. I know the individual, I know the house, I know the background. I think as we look at the picture, the house is sort of an L-shaped house. There is a paved patio in the corner on the backside of that house. Part of the house and part of that patio also are really close to a green space that is there that will never be used. I mean, I cannot see anybody putting a road or anything in there just because it is sort of dead ends and there's no place to turn around. But the point there is that building up is an effort to basically protect that corner of the house where the two parts of the main structure are from having any more water damage. The hill sort of slopes down in the back a little bit to it. You also get rains. You also get a lot of shade there with no sunshine. And you're talking wood rot all on the back side. They're just looking to put a roof and protective layer and maybe a screened porch over that concrete patio to protect the house and their investment in the house. So it's not continually, dealing with wood rot or other greater potential damage. And again, because this was a house built in, I think it was 85 or 82. Yeah, before any sort of definition was there. You can see why they might have done that. And, you put a nice little barbecue pit or something, but they just want to enclose it to protect that area of the house that is susceptible to the wood rot and other things. And, because there were not a whole lot of guidelines back when this was built, it's understandable. It was one of the first ones built in that area. But I do think we do need a definition that speaks to that. And again, that there's a way for someone with a request to do this, to have not necessarily a variance, but basically a grandfather clause or something else that because this is a makes sense type of thing. This is not, I'm trying to, back this up all the way into the neighbor's fence line because
Right.
I had put some pavers in there and now I'm going to just cover the pavers. That's not it at all. This is one that's there. He's got a green space that nobody uses or that would unlikely ever be used, just the way that area is laid out through there. I just think this is sort of a common sense one, but again, I think it would help if we did clarify some of the definitions on, especially that vertical building over a paved solid, concrete slab is not adding anything more. It's just helping protect the house in this particular case because of the way it's aligned to the sun and the seasons and, you know, collection of leaves and other debris that really make it problematic.
Alan, I think that this one too is where Susan concluded, or maybe just Scott, that going up was an expansion. And since that wasn't covered in the code, the fallback was the variance. Am I understanding that correctly, Susan or Scott?
So that is, it is hard to put an answer to simplify an answer. You know, what my response was is that if the roof addition extends beyond the patio or involves, you know, walls or support columns, things like that, that the property owner would be better protected by obtaining a variance. And so we're not just looking at, you know, can they go forward today, but on down the road, if there's a variance in place, it's clear this has been approved, it's been recorded, there's no question about it 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever. That also there is that space behind it, that is an unopened road, I believe. I don't think it's green space. Just to clarify that. I don't know if that road will ever be opened. I don't have any idea. I don't know if it even could be if the topography would allow it. But it is, I believe, an unopened road.
That's correct.
Okay. Even if it is an unopened road, look at the position of the house and how close that would be to that road and how close that proposed vertical protective element would be over an already concrete slab.
Yes.
And again, it's a house. The house is like, you know, feet, you know, less than 10 feet from that proposed road, if you're going to continue to call it that. I don't think there's any other building that can be put that isn't already fronted by the road in the front anyway. The first time we discussed it was a green space. So I'm sorry if I misnamed it, but bottom line is, again, this is something that is going to have less impact than what's already in place there. Not that it shouldn't, I mean, everything should be looked at, but I also understand the individual had already either applied for a variance or was requesting it. And so, you know, again, I think we need to be able to move in a timely manner to tell someone yes or no, they can't. But especially if there's a variance and this is a house that's already been there and he's already got something that extends beyond what is proposed here, it's not really going to change a whole lot to what's in place or what could be a future issue. Now, if he plans to build a deck all the way back, that's an issue.
One at a time.
Can I just, I just like to say, at first, what's existing is a patio, something that's ground level and not a structure and not even defined as a structure under our ordinance and not defined as a structure on most zoning ordinances that I'm aware of. I'm not sure a patio under our existing ordinances. I may be wrong. I haven't looked into this. I'm not sure it needs to meet the setbacks, but to the extent that it does, putting a roof structure. So I'm not even sure we're talking about the expansion of a non-conforming use here, because if the patio is non-conforming, fine. But if the patio is a non-conforming use, then certainly putting walls, support post, a roof over a patio is an expansion. I don't know how. I mean, certainly we need to clarify our ordinance, but I don't know how I've read some case law in the area that there's no question that would be an expansion of a non-conforming use.
Bill, if I could, this is Dan Dean, responding quickly to Alan. Alan, I think all of us would probably agree that and I think we spoke to this last meeting, that this case is not going to offend anybody or create any problems if we would agree it and let him go ahead and do it because of the specifics of that case. My concern is always if we create a rule exception to satisfy one particular circumstance that applies then to the whole town, there could be multiple other cases where we would all agree that it would not be a good idea. So I think that's where we have to be careful. It's not to get so tied down in one particular case that a variance would cover and go into creating a rule exception or a new definition of what can and cannot be done, such as adding a roof over any patio in the town, where there may be 14 other cases where we would all agree that it would be a very bad idea. So this particular case, I think we're all in agreement with you, but what we're discussing is changing the ordinance to create exceptions that might apply in a lot of other cases.
And I agree with that, that it makes sense then to get the rule. I think Susan's saying the same thing, that we get a rule that can be understood and that the staff can respond. And so the homeowner knows what he or she would need to do.
I agree with that. One final comment, Bill. Under our new proposed ordinance, Scott, I think that section 609 would help this situation as well, where they might in fact not need a variance. The one where you get a revised setback if all the houses on either side of you are close to the road or within the setback. So instead of having a 30 feet, if all the houses along the street are 10 feet from the road, then that is in fact the set. Or you look at the house on either side of you, and it looks to me in that diagrams that we've seen that the houses on either side of it are within the setback as well. So they may in fact get a revised setback that allow the structure to go forward without having to get a variance.
I'm just highlighting that on screen now.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so I think 609 would give them some relief, whether they'd give it enough to construct this structure. I think it would, just looking at the maps, but I haven't done the measurements, of course. But I think it's possible that this would give several of those instances that you gave to us. I think 609 might give them some relief and allow the construction to go forward without having to get a variance.
yeah, I'm looking at the first paragraph of 609, and I think that is what it provides. Yeah.
But the only point is that 609 also specifically talks to front yard requirements. This is a backyard. And so I don't know whether we need to, again, I think we need some sort of definition that I think would allow something in this case where really it was before any ordinance was written, any guidelines, and it's going up vertically to protect any, damage to the house. I mean, he can make a smaller little covered space and stay outside of that protected zone. But again, knowing the property, I think you've got two properties in front of Main Road. And if you're telling me this road behind it is there, it only goes to a creek after like two houses. And I don't see that anybody's going to be using that, putting in a road, unless you're going to be putting a bridge over a road over that area and opening up another area, which I think is for drainage never going to happen. So again, I just see it, I'm trying to apply what to me is common sense. Not that anybody's making a land grab or trying to abuse the rights of his neighbor or do anything unsightly. He's just trying to protect his home.
Sure. And I'm just highlighting here the language that is in both the existing and proposed ordinance requires permanent location on the ground. Maybe we'll just expand on that.
Understood. But again, like I said, I don't see it causing any additional impact on anything other than protection of the house at this point, because they're not trying to expand the patio area even further into an area that does sort of fall within a restricted zone based upon a road that someone says might be put in at some point. Again, to me, it doesn't make sense that it would be anything more than a green space, and it does violate that, but it was done so before these guidelines were ever put in place.
Let me interject here, Alan. I think we're getting down into the weeds because we haven't been asked to rule on that. It's been used as an example. And I don't think that any variance application has been filed yet. I don't know.
Nothing's been filed. I think it's just a larger issue of just revisiting the actual dimensional standards of the setbacks.
Right.
Primarily just reducing them to in some capacity to better calibrate the existing built pattern of the town and the lot structure.
Yeah.
But Scott, even with reduced rear setbacks, this patio, to the extent it's a structure, again, I'm not sure it's still going to violate even even a 20-foot rear setback, right? I mean, even a
Right.
15-foot rear setback, it's still going to be a non-conforming use.
Right, right,
We're still stuck with the issue is building walls and a roof over something, the expansion of a non-conforming use. And I don't
Right.
see how that's ever not an expansion of a non-conforming use.
right. And I think that that's getting to the issue of, I'm just going to jump real quickly to the expansion language of, again, it's a question of, if it's occurring within said setback, then yeah, that's, I mean, I guess by definition, that is, a variance to the setback standard. In terms of differentiating vertical versus horizontal expansion, if you're doing a vertical expansion and it's not encroaching into the setback, that's the question of, is that an expansion of the non-conforming use?
That's what both the existing ordinance and our proposed ordinance are silent about.
Correct.
So we do, I'm just trying to think out loud to where we go. And again, I'm just brainstorming. We're going to make our presentation to the town council next week. As I understand from Scott, maybe Alex, they don't intend to vote on it. But they'll do that. They have to do it by July 1st. So it seems to me that we can make our presentation, and then it might be that a small group of us can sit down with Scott and go through these and make a recommendation to the whole committee. But I'm thinking out loud now as to whether we want to wait to do that, because that'll make it pretty tight for the council to approve and think it through, particularly on the issue of variances, which are very controversial because people have strong feelings about them on both sides. So I'm wondering if we go ahead with the existing ordinance, or the new ordinance, and then agree with the council that it does need some clarification, that we would undertake that following adoption of the new ordinance by the council. Does that make sense to y'all?
Well, wait here. I think that Scott, we've got to find the core of what it is we're talking about. And Scott's core issue is that our ordinances
Right.
A mixed match of what our reality is. We're small lots with limitations. We have setbacks that are based on communities different than ours. The number one thing to understand setback is, what is a setback for? And the answer is, it is to create a separation between masses, not a Catholic service, but a mass that rises up and establishes itself as a mass. And how far is it from that mass to the mass of the next door neighbor, or the public space that we want protected from the mass? Which is why the exhibit that I gave, and you said we'd get to it later, but as 11:30 is coming up, why do we have roads where the distance between property lines in the exhibit is 78 feet, 94 feet, 130 feet, 108 feet, 40 feet? Well, those are actual spaces. The purpose of those setbacks is to create a distance that separates a mass from someone else's mass, or a mass from the public way where people are expecting to have a certain sense of space as they move by. And if you don't understand it's about mass, I don't know how we address these individual issues. So that the example you have, it is clearly a mass. It changes it from a patio to a mass. And so it does come into play that is an unopened right-of-way that could safely be determined to be something that's going to remain an unopened right-of-way. And so deal with it as a mass. And is the mass something that will violate the community standards, or is it sort of something of no consequence, because just like we talked about reducing the setback to 10 feet where it's woodlands.
Well, you know, I just like to say, I don't consider a patio, with all due respect, Wade, I don't consider a patio a mass. It's on ground level. It's not even visual from an adjoining lot typically.
That's
I
exactly,
just don't get it.
that's exactly what I was trying to say. A mass is something that is up and vertical and in your face or so forth. A patio is not a mass. The deck without a roof over it might be described as a mass, but it's not a very offensive mass because it's not so elevated. It is what is staring you in the face.
Yeah, but Wade, what I think, Mason, what happens when you go up vertically on the patio or the deck, it does become a mass.
Correct. Or better stated, it becomes a mass significant enough to bother you.
Exactly. I think you're right, which is why I think we've got to be careful in defining expansion of a non-conforming use. I understand you're getting to another point on your perspective of setbacks, but from the perspective of an expansion of a non-conforming use, I think it cuts the other way.
Bill, I think your original suggestion, I wanted to get back to that. I think as far as going forward with presenting to the council next week what we've done so far, it seems appropriate at this point, and just to make the council and everyone else aware that thanks to Scott's good suggestions and bringing our attentions, maybe some details we need to further investigate, that in future meetings we'll be perhaps modifying the proposed ordinance, tweaking it further to give some clarification to all these areas we're now talking about. What's an expansion? What's a structure? What's a building? What's a footprint, et cetera. I think we do need to clarify those and discuss them in some detail and come up with some new language to clarify it and make it better. It'll fit the whole community, and we'll hopefully address these individuals' examples as well and give some clarification to them to whether they do need a variance or do not need a variance. That would be my suggestion anyway.
Yeah, I'm thinking that if we had a commission, quote, retreat, unquote, where we just took up these suggestions. And because I'm not as fast as some of you guys, and walking around all the words, it sort of runs me in circles. And so I'd like to be able to sit down and go through them one by one. We've already skipped around so much because we started on the first page, but then we almost immediately went way back to the non-conforming section. So, so would y'all be comfortable with something like that? Let's go ahead with our presentation to the council. They would vote on it. We would make sure they understood that we did appreciate what Scott had suggested, but we didn't want to bog down on the new ordinance until we could really have some time to think about it and talk about it among ourselves. And as you can see, there are people on the commission even that have different ideas about it. So we need to be able to resolve it.
And hopefully by then we'll be face to face, which is a lot preferable from my viewpoint anyway, to have a face to face meeting as opposed to these Zoom meetings.
So Scott, why don't we, you and I get together and let's, we've got a meeting scheduled for April at which we're going to talk more about the storm water, because I think her name is Mary is going to make a presentation based on what Asheville is doing. So if we had a 2-hour meeting in addition to that later in April. Well, we've got, first of all, it seems to me we got to wait to see if the town adopts the new ordinance. I'm assuming they will, but I can't be certain of that. But assuming that, then we can take up these things where we really have some time to think about them and talk about it, and we can solicit impact from the community. I mean, we've gotten emails concerning the issue of the setbacks and the MRA thing. So it seems to me we really need to have some time to reflect upon it and then go slowly through it. So that's what I would propose.
Well, and it is appropriate in legislation that you get a piece before the body and then the opportunity for amendments. And so where this commission and with help of Scott and so forth can agree on something, then that certainly helps the legislative group say, well, we're looking at this whole thing, and the folks who've sent it, have a possible thing for us to consider.
I can understand that, Wade, but we don't really have time to do that because they're not going to vote on the thing at this month's meeting. That puts them into April, when they will vote on the ordinance. If it gets delayed, that gives them only May and June. So I'm just uncomfortable. I want the town council to do what it's supposed to do under the statute.
Okay.
So that's what I want to propose, that we take this up at a second meeting in April, following the town council meeting. The town council meets what, the second Thursday? Is that right?
That's correct.
So if we met the following week, we would know what they had done, and we can take our time and go through this item by item and have some time to think about it, because it's sort of spread out in my mind at least. And I wonder, is that something, are y'all agreeable to doing that?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yes.
agree with that. Not a problem. I do have one other comment I'd like to make is, again, I'm not suggesting we do anything before this, but I do think we need to be careful in how things are worded. If we can go back and maybe amend a little bit, because, 82, I grew up here and I left about 82. I remember when that house was built, and there were many more that have been built since that time. And it is good that we've had some sort of guidance, but there were many, many more built before that time. And as those houses get older and they need maybe some structural reinforcement or some other things, and they had not followed any of the guidelines that we're currently trying to implement for future construction, that there may be some things that need to be done. And we need to try to help those folks too, to have the flexibility they need to, so their house doesn't just sort of collapse and come down the side of the mountain or something, depending upon how it's constructed.
Yeah.
It's just, I
As
think,
long as they stayed within the original footprint.
yeah,
That would be a problem under the
this patio wasn't added after the fact. It was part of, if you want to call it, the original footprint. And if all you're doing is putting a roof over it. So what I'm saying is, I think, there are folks who have bought these older homes and they're fixing them up, and obviously they're going to have to get approval before they make any changes. But some of that stuff, I think, is a common sense thing, and we don't need to tie people's hands. But again, I don't want to delay the process any further, because I think we do need to formalize the changes that have already been made.
Scott, are you comfortable with that procedure?
Yes, and I'm just wanting to clarify, I'm just going to bring up, just clarifying, our next meeting is currently scheduled for April 8th, 10:30 to noon.
Right.
And then we had also, I believe there's also the discussion of trying to set up a recurring schedule for at least future recurring planning and zoning commission meetings. But this other meeting that you're discussing for April would be a specially scheduled meeting, correct?
That's right. I
Okay.
remember Dan Dean advising me yesterday that it's all Mason's fault. We called him to find out if we should go on the commission. He said, "Oh, we only meet once a year, so it's no big deal." That has changed. So Scott and I will set about trying to schedule a 2-hour retreat just to deal with the issues raised in these memos that he sent to us. And that would be the week after the town council meeting. That was the town council meeting. If we meet on the 8th, I can't get to my calendar because it's covered up by this Zoom. The 8th is, what'd you say, a Tuesday?
Thursday.
Thursday.
It's
So
the second Thursday of April.
Okay, so if we met the next week, we would then know, if we met on the 15th of April from 10 to 12, we could deal with these issues.
Possibly, certainly.
That's what I would propose. So let's make a commitment to each other that we really need to study these. We will have the new ordinance. Hopefully we'll have the sense of the council by then, and we will have the action of the council, hopefully, on April the 8th. So we will then just have to deal with the one ordinance, and we can go on from there. So that's what I would propose. And it sounds to me like that's agreeable. So is there any other business that anyone would like to bring up?
Yes. How many of us have had 2 shots? I'm wondering when it might be safe for us to meet in person with masks.
That's a very good point. Scott, I would like to propose that we meet on the 8th in person. And on the
Okay.
15th. So Susan is going to give us a written opinion that we can do that, I'm sure.
And just to clarify, myself and other staff that are under 60 have not had any shots.
Right.
But many of us are way past 60. I mean,
Sorry, I was throwing out an arbitrary number.
it would be interesting to know because May, by the end of May, everybody in America can have it. So it's not many meets between that now and then.
Right.
And so be good to know when it might be safe for us to meet in person.
But if Scott or anybody else is not comfortable being there, I assume we could set it up by Zoom and let those folks join by Zoom if they're not comfortable. I certainly would respect that.
That would be my solution too. That'd be great.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
fine either way. I've got my second shot this coming Tuesday, so.
Well, I know
Right.
Dan has had his, Mason has had his, I've had mine. Alan will have. Sally, I assume that you have, although you're under 40, so you probably haven't.
No, I have not had mine.
Okay.
And Wade has had his.
Okay. Well, I think we've got a way forward. Now at the meeting of the retreat of the town council next week, Dan and Mason and I have met and got a simple presentation to meet with some specifics, but we're hoping that most of it will be driven by questions from the council members, but we're going to give them an overview and some limited discussion or presentation about certain specifics. If any other people would like to participate or attend, please just let me know. I think that is in person, is it not?
That's my understanding.
It's in person for the members of the boards, plural, excuse me.
Okay.
But the community will still not be able to attend. They'll have to watch by Zoom.
Okay, good. So y'all let me know if you would like to participate, and I can share with you what we've got in mind. It's not very
Sexy.
over specific. Okay, any other business to come before us?
Well, I would volunteer to meet with you and Scott if it was appropriate, but up to y'all.
Okay, good.
I'm amenable to that.
I'm happy to join the discussion.
Yep.
What discussion are we talking about?
Yeah, I don't know what discussion I thought you switched over to the discussion of of what Scott wanted to do, not about the presentation.
Correct.
Okay. So let's see if we can meet next week. Scott and I'll get together and set a time where we can have a session where we start to go through these, but we really do want to wait until the council acts before we get too far down the road.
And
You got me confused, Bill. You talking about another meeting in addition to our scheduled 2-hour meeting?
No, I'm just as a group wanted to get together and discuss it. I thought that's what Wade was saying.
As I and Mason both indicated, we would be willing to join you, Bill, and Scott next week. If we decide that we can do that and we decide it in this meeting, then that should constitute the notice that would allow four of us to be together.
Yeah, but I'm like Dan, now I don't know what we're going to be doing.
I mean, I'm happy to join any meeting too. I'm just confused as to what this meeting is about. Is it a meeting about the meeting?
I don't think it is. I think, Wade, that it's really premature until we set the retreat down for April the 15th. That's where we're going to really go through all this. And I didn't think that we would need another meeting before that to prepare for that meeting.
So just to clarify, the Board of Commissioners retreat is on Wednesday, March 17th. The next scheduled Planning and Zoning Commission meeting is on Thursday, April 8th. So then you were proposing.
And that's the same day as the town council meets, is it not?
Correct.
So at that point, we would know if they had acted on the new ordinance. And
Well, except the council meets after our meeting.
right. So that's why we would need to meet again on the 15th to now deal with these questions and suggestions that Scott has raised.
April 15th.
April 15th. That's right.
Yes. Okay.
That's what I intended. And I don't see a need, Wade, to meet before that, unless you just want to get together with Scott and go over them so that you understand them.
I'm only an alternate member.
Yep. Okay, that's the schedule I propose. Is there any other business to come before the commission? If any member of the public, they have a right to comment, so we do need to. Alex, how do we let non-member participants make comments if they want?
So Angie's received written public comment in advance and she'll read that.
And there is a hand raised by John Fox.
Okay, why don't we let him speak?
He may not be able to speak directly because you don't have phone audio automatically. He may
Yeah.
need to call in to a certain number.
Alex,
I'm working on
I
it.
have. I'm sorry, go ahead, Alex.
I'm trying to figure that out if we can make the participants able to speak.
If you wave over his name, there's an allow to talk option.
I don't even see his name.
I think Scott's
You might open it up
right
on the
now. You're the only
participants.
one that has that feature. I don't have that feature.
Okay, would you like me to try it?
I'll let the board decide that.
Yeah, I think if John wants to say something, I think we should let him. But we are there. Oh, I see John on there now. So Scott, can you wave your wand over it? I see he's muted, so maybe he can unmute himself.
I'll live for the day I can wave my hand and anything will happen.
Well, now he's disappeared now. There he is.
I've added him as a panelist. Let's see if he can.
Okay. How can his microphone is muted.
Yeah, he may have to unmute it himself.
Yeah. John, can you unmute your system? There you go. Okay, John, can you hear me?
You're talking to John Fox, right?
Right.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was taking a phone call off in another room for a moment. I'm just now coming back, so apologize.
You had your hand up to say something, and I just wanted to recognize you before we adjourn.
I actually had that clicked by mistake, I guess. I was just listening in, and as a family member that owns 314 North Carolina Terrace, we're just concerned about the MRA proposal there between Assembly Drive and Georgia Terrace. And I know you haven't seen any formal information from the MRA, but you will probably down the road. And we just, a number of us think that there's a better place for that to happen, that lodge, and that would be the east end of an extension off of the Assembly Inn all the way to the McCollum House. That's pretty much, and that area would not disrupt the historic neighborhood, which will be what will happen if the current proposal that MRA has goes into effect, and it's going to uproot some people that have had a long time neighbors right there. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John, and you'll have an opportunity to do that again. The way I understand the procedure, the application gets filed, then it goes, the zoning administrator considers it, submits it to the planning commission for review. The planning commission under the ordinance does not, all its meetings are public, but they don't have a quote public hearing at this point on the application. They make a recommendation one way or another to the Board of Adjustment, and that board then holds a hearing giving 21 days notice, and that's a full hearing, and then they would make the decision. And as I understand the ordinance, their decision to the courts, not to the town council. So the town council really doesn't feature into that, as I understand it, which seems odd to me, but that's the way the North Carolina law is. So.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Angie?
Yes.
How many comments do you have?
I believe 11.
Are they in written form, like emails?
They are in written form.
So I'm going to propose that you just send those to the committee, and we'll accept them as comments if that's acceptable. And then we'll take those up if necessary as we get to the next meeting. Is that legal?
Alex, what do you think?
I think it's my understanding that they have to be read into the public record. I'm sorry, I don't know that for sure. I don't know.
Well, just to avoid, let's go ahead and read them in. Angie, just read them in. You don't need, just put the names and what they're saying, but you don't have to put the very truly yours and all that.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
The first one is from G. Wayne Drummond, manager of Georgia Lodge. I would like to know if an environmental impact study will be required before the proposed resort on Assembly Drive moves forward. I believe it should be.
Let me interrupt you, Angie. Are these the ones we've all gotten copies of earlier?
No, I have some new ones.
These are the new ones.
Only Mason, Dan, and you got copies. No one else on the commission did.
Okay, then go ahead and read them. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, I would like to know if an environmental impact study will be required before the proposed resort on Assembly Drive moves forward. I believe it should be required. I'm incredulous the MRA would prioritize this new resort when they have their summer college staff paying to live in substandard, partially condemned lodges.
Ouch.
The second one is from Kyle Kirk. This question is in two parts. I've been made aware of the proposed new regulations for setbacks and therefore want to inquire if this proposed change in regulations is to cater specifically to the planned lodge development. Secondly, if it is not in specific reference to the lodge, can any member of the committee provide exact examples of any other properties within the community that have stated that they would benefit from changing the current zoning? I feel that this change in zoning has the possibility for misuse through further development of the MRA's planned lodge. This one is from Priscilla Hayner, at 319 Assembly Drive. I understand that your agenda for the meeting on March 11th will include a discussion of changes to the setback requirements in Montreat. Certainly, some small variations in some circumstances may be appropriate. However, if the setback discussion is intended to address much bigger picture questions, such as a newly planned structure that could reach to the road or to the edge of the neighbor's property, then I would be opposed. But more importantly, I would urge that this be part of a larger conversation. According to the town council retreat last week, Montreat is about to embark on a process to update its 2008 comprehensive plan. Maybe the right context in which to think through changes to zoning parameters if such changes may considerably affect the future look and feel of Montreat. I would presume that this process will include significant public input, which is an important element. The next one is from Irina Hanger. I am writing regarding the agenda item reconsideration of zoning setbacks. I would like to express my concern over changing the current zoning setback requirement. The required setback is in place, at least in part, to protect the integrity of the Montreat scenic view from Assembly Drive, as well as to protect the view from neighboring properties as they sit on their porch and look at the mountains. Our view has already been greatly compromised with the building and changing of the setback of the new historical foundation. Now we see a brick wall. Before we saw trees. It's scary to think of that happening on the other side of our house as well. Please do not change the current setback. The next one is from Jane Frith Warner. I am concerned about the inclusion on the agenda of an item called reconsideration of zoning setbacks. I do not know why this would be on the agenda, but I certainly wish to ask the board to protect the natural environment of Montreat, including the space between buildings, the trees, the natural landscape. I would ask the board to oppose any change which would bring buildings closer to the road. That would diminish the beauty of Montreat, which depends in part on a view of lovely natural green spaces. If the purpose is to eliminate in advance potential zoning problems for a construction project, this would not be a good reason to change the Montreat standards. The next one is from Ann Hayner at 319 Assembly Drive. I see on the agenda for your March 11th meeting, the item reconsideration of zoning setbacks. It continued from February 4th, 2021 meeting. However, no minutes of the February 4th meeting are available online, which makes it very difficult to understand the question and consideration. I would appreciate hearing a summary of the previous discussion at the meeting, but lacking this context, I do want to state my concern that zoning setbacks have a valuable purpose in protecting the quality of life on private property. While there may be logical reasons for allowing small variances, I am opposed to any zoning setback changes which would allow more leeway for large new structures, such as the proposed hotel on Assembly Drive, to further encroach on the quality of life of the community. The next one is from Kate Hayner. I am writing to express my concern over the possibility of changing the current zoning setback requirement in the agenda item reconsideration of zoning setbacks. While I recognize that a setback requirement may mean that the hillside is impacted, I feel that the required setback allows for homes to not be impacted by other homes and/or buildings that would negatively impact the view as well as the peaceful enjoyment of one's home. The next one is from John J. Fox III, 314 North Carolina Terrace. I am adamantly opposed to any setback maneuvers which would allow any large structures to be built. And you know that I am specifically talking about the proposed MRA monstrosity between Assembly Drive and Georgia Terrace. The next one is from Heather Williams. I write as a part of the Hayner Williams Foreman Gunselman family who share and cherish the historic Montreat Cottage at 319 Assembly Drive, which was built around 1908 by my great-grandmother and early mayor of Montreat, Mary Elizabeth Benedict Foreman. I understand this week, Montreat government will be considering an ordinance or rule change that would reduce the required setbacks for new construction inside the town limits. As I have previously communicated to the commission, I have serious concerns about the large lodge and conference center with an underground parking garage that the nonprofit MRA has announced it will build right up to the edge of the property, abutting our family's narrow lot. This structure, as currently planned, would sit about 20 feet from the southern walls of our cottage and extend eastward and downslope towards Flat Creek. The above-ground built structure is planned to be 33,000 square feet, and the concreted surfaces appear from architectural drawings to be another 40,000 to 60,000 square feet. The structure will also have an underground space that likely will match or exceed the above-ground space. Our great-grandmother's cottage, which has not been expanded since around the 1920s, in which we've maintained in beautiful condition for future generations in its historic proportions, is just over 1,100 square feet. I ask that the commission vote against any reduction of setbacks for new construction for the following reasons. Number one, Montreat land prices are really high, and that could be its ruin if rules about new construction are changed to suit the MRA's campaign to build a large lodge and conference center in a historic part of town characterized by small cottages and boarding houses. Lack setbacks incentivizes a particular kind of development that suits the lifestyles of people with a great deal of money, and that also functions as a smart investment for resale. If setback rules are minimal, buyers with deep pockets can and will tear down existing structures and build larger homes that stretch virtually the width and or length of the property line. It may be garish to look at, but it is a rational use of the asset from the buyer-investor point of view. One look at any beach community on the east or west coast of the U.S. where setback rules have been relaxed will show that cottages and historic structures get demolished at a rapid pace and are replaced by garish mini mansions that cover most of each lot. The result is a set of crowded, contemporary, multi-story homes with big driveways to accommodate fancy cars, SUVs, status motorcycles, off-road vehicles, etc. Because of the crowding, many such structures do not have generous front porches and front-facing sociality, but instead direct social behavior towards interior spaces or status rooftop perches and cantilevered social rooms on top floors with tinted windows so the owners can look out and down on people and yet remain anonymous to the people walking or riding bikes below. I love the fact that Montreat does not look and feel that way, at least not yet. But if land use rules change to accommodate a giant structure in the midst of cottages on Assembly Drive, they will also apply to the rest of the town for years to come. With capital from all over the world rushing into the land through REITs and other investment vehicles, can Little Montreat survive as one of the last real places in America with rules that tell developers that they can whatever they want on these mountain lots? Please think carefully about what the next generation will inherit as a place, not just a set of taxable properties. Number two, big houses on small lots have a huge impact on the environment, particularly surface waters. Runoff from roofs and impermeable surfaces like driveways and concrete patios carry contaminants that affect stream ecosystems and all the terrestrial animals like birds and mammals who feed on flying insects, fish, and amphibians. New construction will mean a lot more disturbed soil, which will become damaging sediment in streams affecting water temperature and dissolved oxygen levels in wet months. In dry months, it will mean more particulate matter in the air, with attendant respiratory health consequences for vulnerable populations, including children, the elderly, and people with asthma or other chronic conditions. The loss of tree cover from large structures covering maximum allowable space and lots will also affect wildlife habitat and will increase the heat island effect of urbanized spaces. That means that more people will be using or even installing air conditioning in summer months, which will mean more pollution, including a lot more greenhouse gases. And I have one more from Robert Warner, 346 Chapman Road. Dear Planning and Zoning Commission, I wish to address the current controversy concerning the construction of a lodge and meeting rooms on Assembly Drive in the location of the current Galax House. I will limit my comments to two issues: zoning and reaffirmation of the responsibility of the mayor and commissioners in a representative democracy to represent the interests of the citizens of Montreat. With respect to zoning, the proposed lodge and conference center represents a prima facie violation of the Montreat zoning ordinance. The lodge is to be located in an IR zone. It requires a conditional use permit per Montreat zoning regulations. Per section 704.1, the purpose of this IR zoning district is to provide for a zone of transition between purely residential and purely institutional districts. The operative word here is transition. In this particular instance, the authors of the Montreat zoning ordinance further reinforce this element of transition with a specifically designated second purpose: to provide for protected property values in areas which are predominantly residential in character. This area is predominantly residential in character, as well as being historic. The Galax House can be viewed both in size and in architectural style as transitional. A modern 33,000 square foot, 50-room lodge plus meeting rooms at this location on Assembly Drive cannot rationally be referred to as transitional. The proposed lodge cannot be built in this location. To do so violates any honest reading of the IR zoning specified in the Montreat zoning ordinance. Rather than aligning to the designated IR zoning, a huge facility in this location defeats and renders null and void the IR zoning itself. It simply turns an IR zone into an institutional zone. Secondly, I wish to address the stated concerns of the citizens of Montreat, of which you are no doubt already far more aware than I. If I may, I would direct you to page 2 of the Town of Montreat Comprehensive Plan of April 2008, wherein the Montreat vision, as well the mission statement of the board, is given as follows: to seek ways to maintain and improve the quality of life, preserve the natural beauty, and promote responsible growth while maintaining our community image, heritage, and traditions. According to the tabulation of 373 surveys, which appears in this plan, the item of greatest concern to Montreat residents and property owners by an overwhelming margin is preservation of character. And in this, perhaps you might find a mandate from the citizens. I believe you've already heard from or will soon hear from those you represent, detailing the many ways in which this proposed new facility runs counter to the mission statement of the board and to the preservation of the character of Montreat. Many believe it reduces the quality of life, alters and threatens natural beauty, promotes irresponsible growth, and disrespects community image, heritage, and traditions. Heather Williams has offered the following information at the Montreat Stewards email site. Ms. Williams is a professor at Pomona College in California. She was a co-founder of a community-based water monitoring, education, and stewardship project in the Lake Titicaca Basin in Peru and Bolivia. This is a major construction that will affect the integrity of Assembly Drive. It will require many heavy cement trucks and fill trucks, plus giant drills to put pylons into bedrock many feet below the surface of the slope, which is probably a lot more weight and wear and tear than Assembly Drive was designed to bear. Construction also will affect Flat Creek. I expect that if the construction companies in charge have barriers to downslope transports of solids, there will still be discharge of hydrocarbons, metals, and probably radiation. Radiation comes from naturally occurring uranium, radium, and thorium that is present in a lot of concrete aggregate, and it is soluble in water. It's a very big concern with the construction of an underground parking garage on a mountain slope that feeds groundwater into the stream just a few feet away. An underground parking garage will leach that radiation, plus hydrocarbons from leaking automobile oil and automotive gunk for as long as the garage exists into streams and wells. Additionally, this conference center hotel complex will increase the impermeable surfaces on the site by a degree of magnitude. That means a lot of uncontrolled stormwater runoff into the stream and a loss of considerable amounts of tree cover and wildlife habitat. I don't know that MRA or anyone else has a legal right to build a structure that will have those types of impacts. Emmy Hay, Alexander Hancock, and many others have spoken eloquently of the need to preserve the character, heritage, and traditions of Montreat. Ms. Hancock describes Montreat as a state of the heart, a special place because of the kind of people who settled it and have been coming back for over 100 years. Ms. Hancock has already written to the town council, stating her wish to preserve the character of Montreat in respect to those who funded and built the town, those who live there now, and for generations to come. I will close by asking that the commissioners listen to and follow the wishes of the citizens. Perhaps you can appreciate that this matter is disturbing to the citizens of Montreat. There is at least the appearance that the mayor and commissioners have known about this plan for quite some time, while almost all of its citizens did not and are now shocked to learn of it. Mr. DuBose made clear the MRA's reasons for this in a February 17th Zoom meeting with a group of citizens. Obviously, with some of the past scrapes the MRA and the town had been in prior to my arrival, we wanted to avoid that at all costs. I hope and I believe that the elected officials of Montreat do not share this point of view. Mr. DuBose further stated that there were missed opportunities in the past, and we're not going to let that happen again. Who is this we that is able to dictate to the community? Mr. DuBose also informed those in the Zoom meetings that the prior zoning administrator had reviewed the plans and responded, "I don't see any major challenges." In the words of Mr. DuBose, I'm not quite sure exactly what we're going to have to go to the town for in terms of permission. This is somewhat alarming. Is the government of Montreat now an oligarchy? The MRA doesn't need permission. The MRA is not going to let that happen again. The citizens are best kept out of the loop to avoid anything similar to past scrapes. Abraham Lincoln spoke of government of the people, by the people, for the people. It is not only an American ideal. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. With the leadership of the mayor and the council and the Planning and Zoning Commission, let us secure this right for the people of Montreat as well. A good place to start would be for the town council to delineate the specific problem or problems with respect to the future of Montreat that the MRA is seeking to resolve, as well as all the possible solutions and alternatives that probably should be considered. This could be put before the citizens and or a citizens commission and their input solicited. Rational and fair planning would emerge from this. And that's all I have, but Mr. DuBose has his hand raised.
Yeah, Richard, thank you, Angie, for all of that. Richard, you want to make a public comment?
Sure, Bill. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So I'll just keep this brief because I know it's been a long meeting. Just want to speak directly to a few of the points that were raised in the correspondence that you all heard. The first relates to the nature of what we are attempting to do and its description as a resort by a couple of the people who spoke out. Obviously, as a nonprofit tax-exempt organization, we are not in the process of developing a resort. The facility that we have been working on and that will come to you all as a proposal at some point perhaps is simply an extension of the hospitality that we already provide in our other lodges and an Assembly Inn, and an extension of our mission and ministry. There is a rumor going around that I have claimed that over the next 5 to 10 years, our project has the intention of or the outcome of uprooting people who live on adjacent properties. That is not true. And in fact, I have stated on many occasions directly to the adjacent homeowners that they have every right to stay where they are and to continue to enjoy their property as they have. The third thing I would like to point to is Mr. Drummond's concern about the lodging of our summer staff. In fact, our summer staff are typically lodged in during the summer in 3 lodges: Sylvan Lodge, Balsam Lodge, and Lookout Lodge. All 3 of those lodges have, in fact, over the last 2 years been renovated. I would agree with Mr. Drummond's assertion that they were substandard prior to those renovations, but they have been renovated, and they await the incoming of our summer staff in May and June this summer. So Mr. Drummond can take that off of his worry list. The fourth thing I will to point out is to make sure that you all are aware, and that everyone listening in is aware, that we have been instructed by our architects and by our construction manager that Montreat has some of the most stringent stormwater and environmental restrictions on planning and development that they have experienced. We obviously plan to comply with all of the existing environmental requirements and standards, and make sure that our construction, should it move forward, not damage Flat Creek or have any other environmental impact. The last thing I would point to you all, particularly as it relates to your conversation regarding setbacks, if we're in the middle of a schematic design process, having completed the conceptual design process, so I'll speak right now only to the conceptual design, but the conceptual design was developed with the existing setbacks in mind and complies with, as does it comply with, height requirements and other restrictions that are in the existing ordinances. It complies with all of those standards. As you all contemplate perhaps loosening those setbacks, I don't think you need to worry about our intention to take advantage of that. I'm willing to state publicly today that we have no interest in moving, regardless of where the setbacks may loosen. We would have no interest in moving the building either closer toward the street or closer toward our adjacent neighbor, the Hayner family. You have my word on that, and I'm willing to put that in writing if necessary. But please don't let the concern about the conversation about setbacks be shaped by our project. The last thing I'll say is that our board meets on Monday. We are obviously going to be taking up this issue, and our plan is to review very, very carefully, once again, the logic that led the board to approve the conceptual design and concept at its November meeting. Many of the items of correspondence that Angie just read out have been compiled because we have had them sent to us by town officials and directly by those who've written them. The board will have access to all of that input, or at least certainly a generous sampling of that input, and all of the major arguments will be summarized and highlighted and debated by our board during the 2 days we're together. The board ultimately wants the community to know that we understand that in making a decision to move forward, we're not looking at a 5-year decision or a 10-year decision, but we are making a decision to move forward in our mission and ministry that has 50 to 100-year implications. We understand the importance of that, and we're going to take that very, very seriously. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Richard. Angie, do you have anybody else?
I believe Kate Hayner has her hand up.
I don't see her on mine. So this will be the last comment before we adjourn.
Yes, thank you. This is Kate Hayner, and I just wanted to, for the record, set the record straight that in a Zoom meeting with about 8 neighbors and Richard DeBose, he did say to us that on record that he expected in the next 10 years to own our home and Georgia Lodge, which implied to us that there was a greater plan for that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Any other comments that?
Bill?
Yeah, yes, Mason?
I just want to make clear for those folks out there that there seems to be an implication that we may have, just to make it clear, that the new ordinance that we've proposed and sent many months ago to the town council, we made virtually no changes in setbacks whatsoever. And one small possible reduction in a rear yard setback next to a
green area.
a green area, green space. That's it. There are no changes in the setback. We did have a discussion that came up today regarding setbacks, specifically in the context of looking at non-conforming uses and expansion of non-conforming uses and how those related to setbacks. But there's been no motion to increase setbacks, period. And that certainly the ordinances we have sent it to the council does not propose any setback change except for the very minor one I just mentioned.
Thank you, Mason. That's helpful. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Then we are adjourned. I want to thank the members of the public for being here, and we appreciate all the comments. And we will look forward to meeting with the council next week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, as always, for your leadership.
Well, thanks, Mason.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
I'll give you-
Everyone else, have a good week.
Thanks, y'all too. Bye-bye.
Bye.